Okay, this is so that those who want to view it afterwards will be able to. But if you don't want to be on the recording, you can turn off your video.
And not say anything.
Yeah. Okay, well, Adrian, it is 7 o'clock.
Okay, well, in that case, we probably should get started.
Okay, if people, I'm gonna mute people. But if you mute yourself, that would be good.
He's right up there, I'm 31 right now. What that means.
It's the middle.
Yeah, some people don't realize they're not muted. Okay, I'm gonna mute most people.
Yep. Okay. Good. Well, let's get started then. Well, welcome everybody to 2022 and a whole new session of Sustainable Rossmoor. We have a fairly active agenda today. So I think we should get going fairly quickly here. Particularly, we want to talk about re-engaging, about how do we get back to, once COVID gets over, which we hope will be fairly soon, how do we get back to a place where we're all far more engaged with this than we can be over Zoom? So I want you to think about that a little bit. And we'll talk in detail about various different ways about doing that. And then we have a speaker, Kristina Hill, and she will actually be present. The talk she's giving is pre-recorded, but she will be present and will be able to answer questions afterwards. So that's very nice. So, some Zoom ground rules here. I think we've seen those before, but do use the hand raise thing if you want to, or chat.
Adrian, you need to share your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry, my mistake. There we go. Share. Okay, does everybody see the screen now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so let me go back just to show the agenda. Okay, have some committee reports real quickly. Then, as I said, re-engaging with you, and then we have the speaker, Kristina Hill, who will be here, in fact, to answer questions. So with that, let's get started with finance. Amanda, are you on the call? No.
Here,
Okay.
I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I'm here. Sorry, I didn't update the slides, but I can report that we had $400 of membership revenue in the month of December, $15 of expense for Zoom, and our ending bank balance is $12,071.
Okay. So this is a profit-making enterprise, it sounds like.
Oh, yes, we keep making money.
Okay, good. And membership report, Paula, are you present?
Yes, she is.
Paula, can you unmute yourself? I don't, oh, there she is. So she did not, she doesn't have audio, it appears. So Brad, you might want to rescue her.
I'll be back.
Okay, we can come back to that. Or if you want to wait, your call.
Okay, well,
This is Amanda. I can report there were 20 renewals, and that accounts for the $400 of membership fees during the month of December. No new members in December, but 20 renewals. Oh, there it is, 20 renewals in December.
Yeah.
So,
Kathy. Yeah. Kathy had a question of why is Survey Monkey so high? And they recently had a high increase.
No, she's out of commission. So why don't you just go ahead and
Okay. Okay. Can Paula?
okay, well, let's move on here.
Okay. Okay.
I will say that,
Carol, do you read?
yeah, there's some weird feedback coming from somewhere, but I will say that the traffic talk focus is for this year, at least to start the year, is going to be on composting. You've probably read a lot about it in the newspaper and other places because everybody's focusing on compost. It's fairly easy to figure out what to compost. It's taken away at no extra charge. It creates extra space in the landfill if you compost stuff you were putting in landfill. So it's a win-win-win if we compost more and better. I would say the main takeaway from this slide is that there are a lot of things that people don't realize they can compost. It's not just for food scraps, as you see on the list there. I think paper towels is the most frequent thing I see in recycle that never belonged in recycle. It belongs in compost, whether they're clean paper towels or not, or food stain, it doesn't matter. That the reason being that paper towels, napkins, and egg cartons are all short fiber. They're made out of things that were recycled at least once before. So they can't keep getting infinitely recycled. So they can be composted and turned into good soil nutrients. So that's that for that slide.
Casey's have a question.
Okay.
A new California law went into effect, I guess, December 31st, that we have to compost. What do you think what will the impact be in Rossmoor?
It will have no impact. If you read the fine print, it actually indicates that garbage companies have to make composting bins available. They don't go house to house and make sure people are using them. So there's no legal impact here, at least. It will affect businesses, commercial enterprises, restaurants. That's where the big amount of composting is. Food waste is occurring anyway. So that, and there's also another law that we'll not talk about tonight, but will affect making usable food given to shelters and other places that need it. So the state is doing some good stuff about composting and food.
Okay,
And,
Leon has his hand raised.
Okay, I think. Go ahead and ask the question. I can't hear. I can't see it or hear it.
Dale, right, if you could ask your question.
This is Dale. Carol, we need to clarify this information about egg cartons, because a lot of egg cartons now are plastic. And so I would assume that they would not go into compost.
You're absolutely right. Egg cartons that are styrofoam or plastic well, excuse me, egg cartons that are styrofoam shouldn't have been brought home in the first place, but if they are, they should go in landfill. And egg cartons that are plastic, if they're clean, can go in recycle. But
Right,
the best thing to do with all types of egg cartons is to save them and bring them to Gateway when Dale lets us know that another White Pony Express collection is occurring, because they can all be reused irrespective of the type of egg carton.
right, thank you.
Yeah.
We're getting a lot of donations. We're gonna be making another trip later this week to White Pony Express, taking huge bags of egg cartons.
Their facility is in Pleasant Hill, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, they do a great job, and you do too. Thank you for making that available to us.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to the next slide.
Can I ask a question about this slide before you move on, Carol?
Absolutely.
I had a question about, I noticed on the list of items that can be composted, it includes leaves and pine needles.
Yes.
What happens with all the leaves that are collected here in Rossmoor?
The landscapers take them up to the big recycling center up at MOD, and they have some special giant sized dumpsters that they use. They drive around to the other side of the big hole that's there, a recessed area, and dump them there. So they are composted. And
Right.
I think, I know the compost is returned to Rossmoor. It's not done here at Rossmoor. So they're ground up and, processed so that they become compost. And then the compost is actually returned here to compost and to use in our landscaping. And apparently from Rebecca Poland, that has advantages to the biology that we have in our soil. It's
Great.
not introducing, pesticides and other things that we have deliberately avoided using.
Great, thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
good question.
And Kathy Ryder had a question. What is packaging? Does that mean paper for meat?
It means anything. A lot of people, well, no, I should clarify that. She's good to ask. Plastic, ordinary plastic should not go in the landfill at all, and nor should paper wrapping. So what you see over in the photo is the bottom of a landfill dumpster that's rusted, and the plastic packaging that has maybe some leftover salad in it, and then another something with wrapped in cellophane, so this plastic wrap that shouldn't be in going. So the food that's in there, but not the packaging, can go in the green bin. So no cellophane, no plastic wrap, no plastic paper containers.
Okay. But can paper, just plain paper, go in?
A little bit. So like newspaper, if you wrap your food scraps in newspaper, that can go in. So we aren't supposed to put paper mainly, the main place for paper is in recycling if it's just paper.
Mhm.
But sometimes the egg cartons will have a paper label on top.
Mhm.
And ideally, if it's a shiny paper label, shiny means it's plasticized, that should be removed. But some paper in the
Okay.
green bin is fine.
Okay, good. Let me move on to the
I'm
next.
so glad that
slide.
people pay attention. This is exciting. Okay. And many of you know that by now, we started last June, Sustainable Rossmoor co-sponsors a film series where people watch the film at home on their green sofa and or whatever sofa they have, and then get together to discuss it. So we co-sponsor it with Sustainable Contra Costa and Generation Green and 350 Contra Costa. They're all listed there, I think. No, they're not. Okay, so anyway, this time it's a excellent, beautiful film, a 90-minute film, feature film, but it happens to be available on YouTube, and it was just released last year. It produced by Robert Redford, and it's called The Public Trust, The Fight for America's Public Land. It's a very moving film. And then hopefully you'll have a chance to watch it before the discussion, but even if you haven't, you can join the discussion. And you may want to copy down the bit.ly link at the bottom, because that's how you could register to join the discussion. But we'll also be sending out a MailChimp with the same bit.ly, and in the newspaper running 3 consecutive weeks, there will be the an advertisement publicity for it with the bit.ly. So you'll find the bit.ly link someplace and join the discussion. It's for 1 hour. And Gretchen Loge is someone I met through the county Sustainability Commission. And she is a real activist as far as fighting for the urban limit line in the county. You'll hear more about that from her if you join the group. And then our film right here in Rossmoor in Peacock Hall is another beautiful film, and another film that's rated 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's called Call of the Forest. This one was recommended to us from Lula McCullough from the Tree Planting and Preservation Committee. And it's a shorter film, and it's beautiful. And we will have a discussion by some of the tree experts at Rossmoor about it, but also be on hand to answer some questions if you have questions about the trees.
Okay. I have a question about Rotten Tomatoes. Should they be put in landfill or in compost?
Oh, you're good. Yes, that's part of the fun engagement we're doing. Yes.
Okay. So let me move on to talk about the solar. As you know, we've been trying to get everybody to sign up for solar before the CPUC takes the real benefits of residential solar away from us, which they're going to do at the end of January. We ran this campaign from essentially September through December. We ended up with 344 Rossmoor owners who said that they were interested. And we now have actually about 134 who have signed up for an installation. These numbers will change a little bit as contracts get done, but it's really quite impressive that we have over 100 people who have now agreed that they will, in fact, install solar sometime here in the next 2 or 3 months.
I'm gonna go.
And just a few sort of nerd facts about this. The total amount of panels that these people have requested represents about 60% of the power generated by the solar farm. So in other words, if you take, all of these panels and put them up there, that's how big it is. And our fellow owners are investing about $2.5 million before the tax credit to do this. And they'll save about $250,000 to $300,000 a year. And probably equally, not quite equally importantly, but very beneficial, I think, is that we've gotten mutuals 1, 2, 3, and 8 to update their solar policies to allow for shared solar and these other things. So I think people are starting to understand that solar needs to be part of our life here at Rossmoor, and we need to adapt to it as it changes, because what's going to happen when the CPUC changes the rules here about a year or 2 from now, it's probably going to be worthwhile moving towards batteries, and so there will be some changes there in our policies that will be necessary as well. So it's going to be an evolving thing.
We have some questions,
Yeah.
Dale and then Carol. Dale, go ahead.
Dale, Adrian, you have done a stupendous job.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
You just, I know you're humble, but you deserve so much credit for this. Thank you so very much.
Well, it certainly wasn't a singular effort on my part. I mean, we had at one point about 30 people every week or every couple of weeks on a Zoom call, you know, and working on this project and working, you know, with the people within their particular mutual. Eric Cox in Mutual 2 did a huge amount. C.S. Wang in 4, John Moe, Mike Sund in Mutual 1, Gilchrist in Mutual 3, you know, Art Salsfoss in Mutual 70, Barry in Mutual 70. So a lot of people contributed to this indeed, but it was fun to be able to do this.
Carol,
Was the second
another
question?
Yeah, Carol, go ahead. Unmute yourself, Carol.
I had a comment and a question. The comment is, I think some people listening in may not realize that the updating the solar policies in the mutuals includes the option for people that have roofs that are in the shade of trees or for whatever reason to still be able to have solar, because it's, you know, shared solar, and their solar panels will go on somebody else's roof, one of the best roofs in the community, so that they get the best possible sun exposure. The other thing I had as a question, I noticed Mutual 70 is not one of the mutuals listed as having updated their policy. Do you know what the status is, or do you, Barry, on that? Is it not happening?
Well, it turns out that all but possibly one person could go with individual solar instead of shared solar. And so it wasn't worth going through all the effort and political capital to get it changed for the one person.
I can appreciate that.
Okay.
We do have quite a few roofs that are fairly sunny, so it's a shame for the one person who doesn't.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
Hey, Al Davis wants to make a comment.
Yes, Al.
Yeah, just for the record, once the one person who would have benefited from shared decided to back out, then it was not worth going through unnatural acts to try and get our board to move rapidly. It doesn't happen very often. So our plan is, now that we have a new year, now that the sales are out of, you know, the established NEM2 thing is out of the way, we will in Mutual 70 propose a complete revision, including carports, including possibly charging carports, all that kind of thing will be a whole new program next year.
Okay, good.
Al, thanks for correcting me.
That's all right, Barry, anytime.
Okay. Whoops. Other committees. Marilyn, did you want to say anything? Chandler?
You're muted, Marilyn.
Thanks, Seth. Thank you. Just a very brief update. We didn't have a meeting in December due to the holidays, so we'll be meeting the end of January. We're continuing with our efforts to identify and inventory additional trees in Rossmoor for the Rossmoor tree tours. And we're looking at identifying, starting to schedule some dates for tree tours. Leila McCullough, a member of our committee, will be initiating that effort. We're waiting for the weather to clear up a bit, hopefully get rid of some of this fog and miserable weather. And with the onset of nice weather, we'll be launching some tree tours. The featured tree of the month in the Rossmoor News has been very popular, and we're continuing with that effort. Peggy Pearson, a member of our committee, is leading that effort, and she's done a wonderful job. And a number of members of our committee have been, I guess you'd say, featured authors in that effort. They volunteered to write those articles, and that's been a real very well received effort. And then we're looking at launching possibly other initiatives as well. We're very, very interested in really trying to address the issue of global warming and the importance of trees in that regard. And so we're looking at other initiatives that we might consider in that effort. So that's it. We're also very interested in working further on the website for Sustainable Rossmoor and really developing a page for the Tree Planting and Preservation Committee. We have a lot of items that we'd like to include on that page. So
Good.
that's it. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, terrific. Well, we'll be talking about the webpage in a few minutes. Barbara, do you want to talk about communications a little bit?
Yes, I do. As many of you already know, we have a Earth Matters column in the Rossmoor News twice a month. It was Bob Hansen's brainchild, and he coordinated it since its inception. And I'm going to try and fill his very large shoes now. And so I would like to ask for people to write articles having to do with sustainability and climate change and anything else that goes around there. So maybe I could put my email in the chat. Just general information. The columns can be up to 800 words, and I have some other information to give you if you're interested. I really urge you to do it. It seems to be pretty popular. So that's my plea.
Yeah, well, as somebody who's written columns, several of them now, I can attest to that it's, at first it's a little intimidating, but after a while you kind of get into it and you think, oh, this is kind of fun. And if it's a topic that you're passionate about and know something about, then it's really gives you an opportunity to share your thoughts with actually a lot of people. Often I get quite a few comments often when I put a column out there. It's like get 10, 15 people send you an email and talk about it. So it's worthwhile. Dave, did you want to say anything about plant-based eating?
I'm really eager to get on with the program, but I'll just say that we actually haven't been meeting during the last couple of months of the pandemic, but we do have a terrific Instagram page. We also have a page on the Sustainable Rossmoor webpage. Please check it out. But we also have a terrific Instagram page. It's called Planet_Friendly_Eating. And it has all kinds of pictures of a variety of food that people here in Rossmoor have made and are eating, although there's a few other people who are involved that we know who post things too. So Planet_Friendly_Eating on the Instagram. If you look at Instagram, and you'll see a lot of planet-friendly eating ideas and things from our table, as well as other Rossmoor tables. So that's it.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Okay, now let's moving on to the next part. Okay, so let's talk about re-engaging with you. We really, it seems like because of Zoom, because of COVID, that we've lost we've lost touch with each other. And so I'd like to engage in a little bit of an exercise here to try and think about, when do we get back together in person? What are people's feelings about that? So talk a little bit about how do we make it fun again? I mean, it should be fun, as well as doing some useful things. What kind of a meeting format do we want? How do we want to communicate? And how should we think about acting locally, perhaps, even though we're thinking globally? So I'm going to talk about those individually, but let's first take a little poll. And I'm going to stop the share now because it's kind of in the way. Barry, do you want to launch that poll?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just launched it. So there are 2 questions we're asking you to fill out. The first one is a single answer. The second one is multi-answer if more things apply to you. So if you could fill that out, then we can share it with the group.
Yeah, we see it. Great.
So you might have to move the bar down to get to the second question.
What about vaccinations? You shouldn't require that.
Open masks.
What?
Casey's out. You should mute yourself.
Well, it's rather cute. It shows it in real time as people answer.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had 10 people answer it so far, 11 out of 22 or so screens.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, Casey's, you only get 1 vote. Okay. Well, that's pretty good. Well, just a few more seconds. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll and I think share the results here with everyone. So 7 are ready now to meet in person. 6 want to wait till Omicron has receded, so maybe in a month or 2. And 3 want to have lower case counts. So, it looks like 41% are ready to meet now, which is pretty good. more than we expected. That's good to hear. And then second one, what would encourage you to meet in person? And all of them have different degrees of being checked. Most popular, vaccination check at all attendees. Require masks, even if the county doesn't, is the next most popular. And opportunity to socialize with food and drinks is next.
All right. Well, I'm glad to see that nobody said, I doubt I'll ever come back.
Yeah,
That's really good.
that's encouraging.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't know if everybody's following this. I'm sure you all are actually, but it seems like everybody's sort of all the experts are talking about that Omicron is going to kind of go high quickly and then drop off rapidly, and that maybe in a month it won't be so bad. But probably, I would guess it's probably going to be a little too early still in February to consider coming back in person, but we might be thinking about it for March or at worst April. I think that would be really good if we could do that. So let's talk a little bit. I hope we can save that poll results.
Yeah, I just saved it.
Okay, terrific. What I would like to talk about a little bit now is the meeting format, the way we've been having our meetings. I mean, of course, we've been sort of pushed towards a sort of a PowerPoint type presentation, which is okay, but with a formal agenda and all the rest of it because of Zoom. But it feels a little formal and stilted. And I was wondering what people would think about, like maybe if we held, especially once we get down in person, if we moved to sort of a round table, literally where people sat in a circle and we talked back and forth, or some other approaches. Does anybody have any ideas or thoughts about other ways that we could actually meet and be in a more a less perhaps formal way. Let me open the floor up. Does anybody have ideas?
I do.
Okay.
So I suppose, I know that we talked about how years ago we used to meet in a circle. And I'm hoping that we will have so many people that that probably won't be possible anymore. But I was thinking of just a circle with 2 rows. Why not? Just like a theater in the round kind of thing, only with people with 2 rows in a circle. And you'd still be facing people across a room. You'd still be communicating face to face. And we might be able to fit almost everybody into 2 rows. Our meetings have been kind of not well attended during COVID. So it might not work for very long, but we could try that maybe. It would mean that the person leading the meeting has to sit at one position in the circle, like let's say the 12 o'clock position or something like that. So it may not lend itself to looking at a screen.
Yeah, but
So
that's fine. I mean, we can, people had meetings and did things long before there were screens.
yeah.
Casey's have their hand up.
That was an applause for Paula, but
Oh,
I threw out there just maybe meeting at a park. I mean, obviously, maybe not the 7 to 8:30 p.m. time slot, but maybe just an informal get together, picnic style, outside. I don't know, maybe a social
yeah.
that is outdoors.
Maybe that would be a good way to bring everybody back together. Sort of like the first one, if we did it, especially if we were doing it in maybe March or April, because the weather would be nice by then, probably. Hopefully, well, actually, hopefully it's still raining, but. Okay, great idea. Marilyn, you had your hand up?
Yes, I would like to suggest that it would still be possible to break up into smaller groups at a larger meeting so that we could have different topics for discussion and involve our committees in taking the lead in facilitating those discussions. And very importantly, I think bringing in some outside experts to serve as co-facilitators of those roundtables, possibly with the goal of not only sharing information, but with coming up with action plans that we could address in the coming year. So, and then those small groups, and not small, but those groups could report back to the larger group key points that they've discussed and different plans for action that they've agreed upon.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Carol, Byron. Oh, there you go. Unmute yourself, Carol. Unmute yourself.
Carol is going to speak.
There. Okay. Good times over evil. My question is, does everybody, and it's partly triggered by the let's do something outdoors. How does everybody, do people think maybe changing the time would be a better idea? And particularly if we think we want to meet more outdoors. At 7 o'clock at night, it's not ideal for that. What does the group think about that? It's not something I have strong feelings about one way or another. Is this the time we've always had the meeting?
Why don't we have a little quick poll here? What if we were to meet at, say, and especially if it was an outdoor meeting, if we were to meet at, say, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, how many people would find that acceptable or desirable? Hold up your hands, please. Okay, we've got quite a lot of hands. I can't see people who don't have their video on, but what about if we were to do it at noon, just as another throw out? Okay, not so much. So something sort of late afternoon sounds like maybe that would be or mid-afternoon would probably be a reasonable approach. Maybe we should try that one time. One of our meetings, like I said, maybe in early May or in the April or March or April timeframe. Let us take a look at that. We'll take that up with the steering committee. Patty Harrington?
Yeah, I really like the idea of meeting outside, doing something. Let's just incorporate all the great ideas that everybody's given so far. But people tend to come when there's food involved. And if we're talking about a time when it's not so scary COVID, and even if they even don't, if people bring their own food, then we can meet and separate, then getting together. And I think Paula's idea of the semicircles is really a good one. And what would happen if we made it flexible? Sometimes I think that the day and the time is important, the consistency with that. But it's almost like we've been using the Fairview room. We can meet outside if we needed to sometimes, and sometimes inside. A combination of those. But I do think that having the slides available is an important part of conveying information. So those were my major points that I wanted to make.
Yeah.
Looking forward to feeling good about getting together again.
Good. Bob?
Okay, just a different type of comment. Probably Carol is way ahead of me on this. But as you go towards April and May, give some thought, and this is again is on the outside meeting and in the round, to inviting the 2 city council members who are probably going to seek re-election to come and talk. You know, if you think about theater in the round, that was actually a performance situation, and that actually might be kind of fun, not to have PowerPoints or anything like that, but just to have them talk to the group about what they think and how they want to approach things, and not anyhow. So I just wanted to leave that as a thought for a meeting that's later in the spring, not that far into the fall, because you can do it in the fall. But I like the notion of trying to get outside and helping and continuing the meeting process in a way that allows that type of participation and without the formality of a PowerPoint.
Good, thank you. Who are those 2 counselors?
I'm almost positive that Matt Francois is going to seek re-election. He's the current mayor. And I'm not as positive about Cindy Silva because this would be her 5th term. But she loves what she's doing, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, great.
We should know by sometime February or March if which of those, if both of them are seeking re-election.
Okay, terrific. Great idea. Thank you. Kathy?
Actually, Bruce.
Okay.
Hi. Sometimes less is more, and this is just something to think about. We meet once a month, but what if we met every other month instead of every month? Would people be more likely to attend if they only had 6 meetings a year to go to instead of 12? I don't know, but it was a thought that occurred to me. I just wanted to toss it out for consideration.
Well, let's just do a quick sort of show of hands here. How do we phrase this?
Before you do that,
yeah,
I don't think we're the target audience.
No,
I don't think it matters. I don't think you poll us. I think we have to ask other people who are not regular attendees.
yeah. Okay, well, it's something then we could send out as a survey.
I mean,
Let's do
I'd
that.
be interested in any comments, but
Yeah,
I don't think we should poll ourselves.
yeah, okay. That's a good idea, though. Anybody have any comments about that particular idea, Bruce's?
I think it's a good idea.
I like it too.
Okay. So we have some support here right off the bat. Eric?
I'll chime in. I think it's hard to have coherence if, I mean, once every 2 months seems too much to me for a group to sort of move forward. So I would like to keep it at once a month. I also really like the idea of outdoors at 12:4. And I definitely support the idea of the circle. The circle is really conducive to more of a sense of fellowship and the double ring if need be, and however that goes. But yeah, I just joined the middle of last year, so I'm not sure how you have done it in the past, but and food and drink is always fun. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Carol? Weed?
And food and drink is a chance to rediscover planet-friendly eating. So we've done that in the past, and it has been very successful. And even considering adding, inviting others that wouldn't necessarily have come before or even come to the next one, just to have an event like we did at Fireside during Earth Month. We don't have to wait till Earth Month. But I also wanted to talk politics for a second to respond to what Bob said. There's definitely going to be more than 2 people running for the position. So I think we should consider how we do that fairly to let other candidates have a chance to speak. So I think the filing date is June. So maybe we think about early summer for something like that, but we don't have to decide it today. So just so you know, there's more than 2.
We can charge a fee to
And
address.
just to clarify one thing, the filing date is actually going to be somewhere around the first week of August.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Okay, good.
And there's 2 seats open. So that may be partly what Bob was thinking. There's
Well, I
5.
thought it'd be fun to get the 2 incumbents in and then.
I think
invite
it'd be
the
more
others.
fun to have the 2 incumbents talk to the other candidates.
However you guys want to organize it,
Yeah.
I just wanted to
But-
introduce the idea.
Yeah,
But
great
to
idea.
clarify, there are 5 positions on our city council. 2 years ago, we elected 3, and this coming year, well, this is the year, we later this year, we'll be electing 2 out of however many choose to run.
Okay, good. Brad?
And Adrian, I know that what we could think about is like 1 month is a regular meeting and the second month is a speaker. So that you sort of alternate every other month. You can still do it every month. And because of Zoom, we have this opportunity to get some fabulous speakers. So that would be my suggestion.
Like tonight, yes.
Okay, good. That's a great idea. Brad? You're silent, Mr. Waite, for some reason.
That's because I turned off the microphone. Not only I unmuted the software, but turned off the microphone.
Super.
I just want to follow up with what Carol and Bob were talking about the city council election. And my question for the group here is, given the fact that the 2 names that Bob threw out, neither one of them are environmental advocates. They're probably not even environmental friendly. And so the question is, do we have the energy to try and recruit candidates from other places in Rossmoor who are? I mean, other places in Walnut Creek? I don't know the answer to that, but it's something it seems to me we ought to think about.
Okay.
And Brad, I will just respond. I think one is more receptive to environmental positions than the other.
Okay, good. I also wanted to, and there isn't really time tonight to go into this in depth, but the website has become rather static. I don't know how many people actually ever go there. So we're going to take, because of the time, we don't have time to discuss it now. What I will do is ensure that we send out some sort of survey, some sort of request, asking people how they would like to communicate, what they would like to communicate about, and see if we can't improve the way that we can talk to each other, both in person and online. And with that, I think we should move on to to our speaker tonight. And so I will go back to sharing the screen and start the talk.
Just a reminder to click on the video optimization.
Yep. Thank you. And I'm supposed to go to 41. Whoa, 41. About there.
I want to thank Dan for your presentation, and I would like to introduce Dr. Kristina Hill, a professor at UC Berkeley in the Department of Landscape Architecture and Environmental Planning. She will be presenting on the impact of groundwater rise to contaminated sites.
We can't hear your screen. Can you make it louder, Adrian?
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit fuzzy.
Is that better?
Kind of low light spot.
No.
I'm able to hear. I'm able to hear, Carol.
Oh,
I'm
well, I have my volume all the way up.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not able to hear.
I'm not able to hear either.
How about that?
Working on a version of thinking
That's
about
better.
That's better.
to affect the Bay Area.
Can't hear
that
it.
is more community specific, as
Cannot
well as
hear.
a version that did some early maps on how far down you actually have to go to get to the groundwater, which, as it turns out, is not very far in much of the Bay Area. So I'm going to talk about groundwater in relation to sea level rise and what's at risk. That image I used for my title slide is actually a zoomed in version of this photograph on the left. And that was taken by folks who sent a picture to the California King Tide Project on Saturday, this past weekend, on Marina Bay Boulevard in San Leandro. And what I think is useful about it is to remember that that photograph, where the groundwater is literally bubbling up out of a manhole, is only 250 feet from the edge of the bay. So if you're within 250 feet of the edge of the bay, your groundwater could be moving up to the surface, depending on how low the ground is versus the bay edge. If you're flat like this, your groundwater is already very close to the surface, if not coming right up to it and over it. So I'm going to come back to this point a couple times, but I just wanted to show a very recent hot off the press example. This is groundwater. I'm willing to bet that if you tested that water, it's not salty, it's fresh. Let me say a little bit more about what is groundwater, because usually it's that thing in California we talk about that we don't have enough of. In the agricultural Central Valley, for example, we use it for irrigation, there's never enough. I'm talking about a different groundwater, which is the shallow stuff. It's right below the surface. If this brown line here on the top of my little cartoon is the soil, the top of the ground, you see how the soil particles have air between them in this part of it, and down below here, they have water between them. That's called saturated. It just means it's full of water. And the top of the saturated zone is what we call the water table. But we're talking about this very shallow water that comes from rain, and it sits in a layer above the salt water. So that's what I mean by groundwater, not the deep stuff that might be under layers of stone or clay and is separated from rainwater from the surface. I'm talking about the very shallow kind. The Dutch are way ahead of us, as usual. They talked about in 2009 how climate change and sea level rise really means water is going to come from 4 directions. It's going to come from extreme rain from above. It's going to come from river flooding from the side, and It's going to come from sea level rise from the side where salt water actually comes in. And it's going to come up from below. And that's the groundwater piece. I want to talk about flooding that comes up from below, like that manhole in San Leandro on Saturday. This diagram is used by the US Geological Survey and some colleagues of mine at the University of Hawaii. They are showing here a lens, what we call a lens. It's like a big pillow of fresh water. And down here where it's yellow, that's the salt water from the ocean coming into the land. It's like the ocean sticks its toe under the pillow and pushes it up. As the sea level rises, the groundwater will rise generally. And in some places, it'll run off of the land surface. I'll talk more about that. In the Hawaii study in Honolulu, they showed that if you don't consider groundwater as a component of sea level rise flooding, that's the top picture. That's how much of Honolulu would flood with a meter or 3 feet of sea level rise. But if you add groundwater, that fresh water that comes up as the toe of the ocean pushes it up, it's lighter than salt water, so it's on top. You get twice as much area flooded. And this study came out in 2012, and I thought, wow, we don't even know where our groundwater is in the Bay Area. We need to know fast, because sea level is going to be one component of flooding, but groundwater is going to get us first and maybe contribute to more flooding than saltwater alone. And some people say, okay, but that's only going to happen within 250 feet of the bay shore. But this study by the US Geological Survey around the same year, 2012, showed that by modeling, they demonstrated that they expect sea level to push groundwater up as far as 3 miles inland. That is really important. And this study was done in New Haven in Connecticut. But it's not so dissimilar in some ways to some of our alluvial fans and the geology that we have. So it's a relevant study. It's a relevant example. It doesn't push it up the same amount. At the shoreline, if the ocean goes up 3 feet, the groundwater goes up 3 feet. But farther inland, it might only go up half a foot, but it goes up. And when we think about contamination, that is literally a game of inches, not a game of feet, because often the contamination is right there above the groundwater, and even the groundwater may be already in it. Underground, when groundwater rises, it enters cracks in pipes. And that means that any contaminants that are in the groundwater also enter the cracks in the pipes. This is a classic example of a pipe that's cracked. I can tell you around the Bay Area, almost all of our pipes are cracked. So this is happening. This is an example of what happens when the pipe is full of groundwater underground. You will see groundwater come up out of that pipe, and you'll also see stormwater come up because now the pipe is full. The pipe is full of groundwater and it can't do its job, which is to convey sewage or rainfall away from areas that are getting a lot of rain. So it ruins a lot of different things that we've designed to make cities dry. Once groundwater rises, you have to think about your whole infrastructure over again. This is a little cartoon I use to talk about how that works. So in the front, there's a dark blue, and that's the salt water. In the back, there's kind of a light blue, and that's the fresh groundwater. Here's a sewer pipe. Here's a dry creek bed, a levee, a road, and a parking lot that caps a contaminated soil area. Watch what happens. The sea level rises. You see it went farther up on the face of that marsh. It got closer to the pipe. First, what happens underground. The pipe fills with water. The creek bed has more water in it. And the contamination in the soil gets wet. And once it's wet, it can move. So that's a very important step. And then eventually you see flooding on the surface. That happens when the soil is already full. When the sponge is full, the rain can't go into it anymore, and it piles up on the surface. So then you start to see big flooding events locally. This is an example from New Zealand where they have high groundwater and they have rising sea levels. And this woman is using a rake to try to clean out her drain, the inlet, because she's got this big puddle around her house. But what she doesn't know is that that puddle comes from water coming up from below, not from water coming across the street in rain. This was a dry day. was just a super high tide, and the groundwater came right up out of their storm drains. The very drains we designed to take water away are going to be the first way that groundwater comes through those stormwater drains and starts to create spot flooding. Those spots get bigger and bigger, though, over time. So how does groundwater affect the risk of extreme shaking and an earthquake? I hate to say it, but we have to connect the dots on some of these things. It's not flooding by itself or groundwater by itself. It's groundwater and flooding in a region that has earthquakes. These are the fault lines of the Bay Area, most of the big ones. There are still some that their geologists are still finding. So this is not the full set of faults, but you can see we've got a lot. We're like New Zealand in that way. In New Zealand, when an earthquake came through a few years ago, the soil behaved like a liquid. And it behaved like a liquid because the groundwater was high when the earthquake happened. And when it behaved like a liquid, just for like a minute, this car fell in while it was behaving like a liquid. And then the energy wave passes, the soil solidifies again, and they had to dig the car out. Luckily, nobody was in the car, it was a parked car. But this is why buildings fall over when earthquakes happen, because the soil is liquefied, behaves like a jelly or liquid when the energy comes through. So we have to plan not only for flooding, but also for the safety of buildings as that groundwater rises and the safety of our infrastructure. It's a complicated story, but you can't just go ahead and build new buildings in these zones where the groundwater is rising, because they may require higher seismic standards. This is a map of where the liquefaction risk is very high or high. You can see in the dark orange and the medium orange around the Bay Area. And all of the communities that I've talked to about special environmental justice issues in the Bay Area have a very serious, very high or high liquefaction risk. So as we're planning for how to protect the most vulnerable communities, and we're putting in things like slurry walls to try to contain contamination, or biological barriers of some kinds, or seawalls, remember that car that dropped down into the dirt. Everything we build is going to have to be built to a different seismic standard in these areas, or we're just setting ourselves up to fail. So I want to talk about one example of an actual community and what's going on with their groundwater and their seismic risks. This is a geologic map of the South Shore shoreline in Richmond. See that dashed line with the question marks on it? That's a fault that the US Geological Survey thinks is there. That's going to add risk to this whole shoreline. All this pink is artificial fill, stuff we just dumped there. And that's dangerous because it's going to have a high risk of behaving like a liquid during the earthquake event. These are all the contaminant sites that EnviroStore would show us. And I've just added labels to show the name of the site and the kind of contaminants that are there. These are world-class poisons. Hexavalent chromium, hydrocarbons with benzene and other volatile organic chemicals, VOCs. These are very serious. Radioactivity, like other places in the Bay, like Hunters Point. These are very serious chemicals. These are not like maybe chemicals. These are chemicals we know very, very well cause very serious health impacts. Cancer, infertility, miscarriage, all kinds of things come from these chemicals, which we never should have manufactured. This is a version of the shoreline, the Richmond South shoreline, that shows an extra high tide. So the high tide comes right up to the edge of all of these sites. There's a Superfund site in the lower right with the circle, the liquid gold site. The Blair landfill has radioactivity. The AstraZeneca site has metals, volatile organic chemicals, vinyl chloride. The Harborfront tract has hexavalent chromium. I could go on and on. This is world-class poison in these landscapes around the Bay, partly because of a history of chemical industries, partly because of a military history, partly because of just manufacturing. We've made a mess. Sea level rise, like what the previous speaker talked about, I have put into a picture instead of using those tables because I think it's easier to understand. And the low risk, or what I really shouldn't call the low risk, but If you're building something that's not very expensive and not meant to be permanent, you could follow this blue line and say, well, by 2050, we might have as little as 1 foot on the blue line by 2050. But if you're building something permanent and expensive, then you need to think about that maximum possible trajectory, and that would be something more like almost 3 feet by 2050. That's possible. And the question is, who's going to pay the price if we put housing in a place where the soil is polluted and the sea level could rise that high? Housing is seen as permanent in most cases, and certainly, you know, what happens to people's bodies, what happens to their families, what happens to their genes, those are pretty permanent too. So it seems to me we should be thinking about the most potentially hazardous scenarios. This is an image my students made of the liquid gold site. It's right here. It's got Baxter Creek coming along the side of it. This is that Zeneca site and UC Berkeley's site over here. Let me show you what happens with sea level rise. Just sea level rise, not even groundwater. 1 foot of sea level rise and this Superfund site has its toes in the water. 2 feet, it's gotten to the center of it where the worst contamination is. 3 feet, it's crossed the highway and now it's affecting a residential neighborhood across the highway. This is very serious early contamination risk for people and for our coastal ecosystems with as little as 1 foot of sea level rise. So that's leaving out the groundwater thing entirely. Now let's talk about groundwater. This diagram shows the light blue groundwater on top of layers of sand and clay, and the sea level rises over here, my ridiculous cartoon waves. Pollution from a contaminated site often leaches down through the soil into the groundwater. And when you pick up pollution in a monitoring well, that's what you're seeing. You're picking up the fact that contamination is in the groundwater, or it wouldn't be showing up in that monitoring well. We often have caps of one kind or another on top of these sites, but that keeps rainwater from mobilizing these contaminants, doesn't keep water from rising into it from below. So here's our today situation, current sea level. As sea level comes up, even just a few inches, groundwater is going to come up at least a few inches, right near the bay in that 250 foot, 500 foot zone. It's going to be 1 to 1. And we're going to see groundwater potentially come in contact with hazardous chemicals and spread them more. And it's not just going to go towards the bay, it's going to go off to the sides. Let me explain some of the super immediate risks. I'm just looking at the Richmond shoreline as an example. This is the king tide recently on the edge of the Zeneca site. The liquid gold site is off to the right there. You can see all the wetlands are flooded also. What can happen is, as groundwater gets into a sewer pipe, and we've already talked about how groundwater can get into a sewer pipe, as it gets into a sewer pipe, the gas component can go uphill. We usually think of water as flowing downhill, but the gas component of something like benzene or toluene can travel up the sewer pipe into the house. And yes, there's a P trap, shaped like a P under the sink over here. But the toilet has an internal trap that keeps sewer gases from coming in. So it's the seal at the bottom of the toilet where the toilet meets the floor. If that's old and cracked, then these poisonous gases, volatile organic chemicals that cause cancer and other kinds of impacts, are entering a house or a workplace or a school. And around the Richmond shoreline, there are a bunch of pipes that go to people's workplaces or schools or houses. So what we really should be doing is looking at whether groundwater is near or in those pipes. And that's going to help us predict if people are being exposed as gases move up the pipes. My students are making these visualizations, and I want to use them to make a pitch, which is when you try to look at data about a contaminated site, you're way back on page 1500 of a PDF before you get to the data about what's in the wells. That is unfair to the public, grossly unfair. What we should be seeing is maps of the monitoring wells, which is what this shows. It shows lines that represent the depth of the water table. And if we had these maps, we could also see the directions of flow. My students are using arrows here to show how contaminants would be moving in the groundwater just on the Zeneca site, as an example. That shows us that serious contamination is moving towards these buildings next to the Zeneca site. That's a very important thing to be able to see. And we don't see it because our state agencies are not providing this kind of mapping tool, which my students, 19 years old, 21 years old, they can make that. So why don't our state agencies provide us with that? Version of a tool one of my students made to show trends. This graph over here in the upper left shows trends in PCE, a dangerous chemical, over time, well above residential standards at a well here on the Zeneca site. Why aren't we seeing that provided to us by the state agencies? Maybe they work through a university, but this is the level of visualization that we're all capable of and what we need to use to be able to get to the point of understanding what's happening in our own neighborhoods. And the infrastructure bill that Congress just passed has money in it for cleaning up contaminated sites. There is no excuse not to clean up contaminated sites. What we need to do is prioritize communities that have been underserved, redlined, discriminated against for decades, and figure out how to clean those neighborhoods up with this money. And that's a political priority, not a technical issue. So that's what I would leave you with as a thought. Groundwater is on top of sea level. So the effect of rising seas and groundwater rise, the groundwater part could be happening today. Could have happened this past weekend, that somebody was exposed to chemicals in their home. So I think this is very immediate. This is not 2050. This is today. And I just want to leave you with that awareness. Thank you, Julia, for inviting me.
Thank you for that amazing presentation, Dr. Hill. Do we have a few minutes for questions? Are you open to that?
Okay, I'm going to stop at that point and go back, and I believe Dr. Hill.
We have the live Kristina Hill, who's joined us. Hi, thank you for joining us. I just want to introduce you to those on the call. And Dr. Hill is Associate Professor of Urban Design and Landscape Architecture and Environmental Planning at the University of California, Berkeley. Also, Kristina, there's someone on the call. Bob Simmons is president of the Walnut Creek Watershed Council. So he may have some relevant comments. And just to share with the audience, I talked with Rebecca Poland, our landscape director, who was unable to join us tonight. And she mentioned there are several sites in Rossmoor where there are year-round freshwater springs that are surface level. So I'm not sure what relevance that has, but there you can see damp areas on the sidewalk any time of year. And they've been tested and they're freshwater. So what can you add that we might want to know that would apply to Walnut Creek or Contra Costa County inland, Kristina?
Well, there are a lot of contaminated sites inland, but not as many and not with the variety of chemicals that we see in former military and industrial sites. So it's more likely that you would see groundwater contamination from an old leaky underground storage tank from a gas station or a dry cleaner that disposed of chemicals inappropriately. That's more likely for your area. And in fact, I looked on the state's database and I saw a couple of old gas station sites that they've been monitoring and a dry cleaner.
Yeah.
So that's pretty typical in newer urban areas. It's not the same level of contamination we're talking about with that Zeneca site or the Richmond shoreline. They have everything there, radioactivity, everything. So I think in your situation, you might, I understand Carol told me that sometimes they turn the water pipes off, then turn them on again.
Not sometimes, once in a while they turn them back on for all day. We're having most every day pipes being repaired and maintained. So it's real frequent. We have really bad pipes in parts of Rossmoor.
Yeah, it sounds like they're old enough that they reached the end of their useful life, like many pipes that were put in place in the 50s and 60s.
Now, the sewer pipes are the the sewers leading out of here are also in that sort of state, would that cause contamination?
And just the fact that they're cracked, which most pipe systems are in the region, just because of seismic activity and settling of soil, doesn't mean it's going to cause contamination. In fact, it's a good thing that water pipes are under pressure. So drinking water pipes are under so much pressure that if they get a crack, the water leaks out, nothing gets in. But the tricky part is when they turn a water supply off, because when they turn it off, that pressure goes away, and contaminants in groundwater, it could just be mud, or it could be some chemical. So even things that are applied to grasses, herbicides, lawn chemicals, they can get into pipes, drinking water pipes, when the water is shut off. And that's an issue. So, and if they're not telling you you should boil the water for a while after they turn it back on, like there should be a period where you're kind of under a boil order after they turn the water back on, because they don't know what's come into the pipe while the water's been off.
I'm taking note.
Okay,
I
but we have some questions.
about
Yeah.
backflow meters. I
I'll-
understand in Rossmoor that we have potable water as well as irrigation water running through shared pipes, and they're not necessarily backflow valves to prevent mixing of those. Could you address that issue?
Well, I am not a plumber, although my first job was as a janitor, so I do know a few things about toilets. But I would think that you would want to have backflow devices because our weather is expected to become more extreme, where we're going to have very wet years, like this year is pretty wet, and then other years that are very dry. So under those conditions, people may forget what to expect in the really wet years. And the backflow prevention devices should be really important.
Casey's, you have a question?
I guess, Dr. Hill, thanks a lot. That was very interesting. I actually lived in El Cerrito, went to Kennedy High, and worked at my college days from Berkeley at the University of California Field Station. And I drove by Stauffer Chemical, which what it was called back in those days, hundreds of times. I'm not sure, but certainly I drove by there hundreds of times. And so interesting to hear about that site. I'm wondering how far up the delta does sort of the sea level rise have an impact? I know Antioch and Pittsburgh have low-lying areas. There's some low-lying areas in Lathrop, which might even be possible to be impacted. How far up will the sea level rise have some kind of the similar impact that you're talking about?
Anywhere where the water is tidal. And not necessarily salty. So the X2 line is what they call the point where it turns from salty to fresh in the delta. And that moves seasonally, and it moves depending on how much moisture there's been, how much rain. But that's just the salt line. Beyond the X2 line, there's a tidal section of many of the rivers. And wherever it's tidal, that's an area where, as sea level rises, the groundwater could change.
Do you know where that line is?
I don't actually know. I haven't looked at the delta in a lot of detail. It's so complicated. People already have staked out a lot of interests and claims, and I'm afraid.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, Kristina, first of all, thank you very much for your presentation. It was really interesting to watch it. The Walnut Creek watershed is about 146 square miles in size. So it's the largest one in Contra Costa County. And most of it is pretty much upland. In response to sort of the last question, recently the Contra Costa Flood Control and Water Conservation District, with a lot of assistance, built what is called the Lower Walnut Creek Project. And that project is really at the base of Suisun Bay, and it is designed to incorporate all of the king tides and everything else. And so After this, if you have a chance, you might want to just look at what they've done. Two things. First of all, my understanding is that the principal contaminant of concern in the Walnut Creek watershed is dioxin. And that is because of all of the spraying of chemicals on grazing land, on agricultural land, and on personal homes, on the grasslands and personal homes. And so that's the principal one. And secondly, Walnut Creek as a city, and it's more so for Rossmoor, is probably about 100 feet above sea level. And so, you know, the likelihood of you know, the contamination from tidal flows getting that high is to me relatively low.
It is very low. There can be changes in sedimentation rates that extend farther up vertically in river systems as sea level rises, but I don't think that you should be concerned about sea level rise causing a change in groundwater levels.
And it doesn't mean that we won't have flooding. And we have a concrete channel down the middle of Walnut Creek, the creek, not the city, that is designed to move water out of the area as fast as possible. And it does that very well. But that also means that you don't have the likelihood of tidal flows and groundwaters, you know, upwelling through the storm drains as you do in some other areas. Your comment about old pipes is very true. We've had some issues with pipes failing, and all of a sudden you have this huge hole in the ground because, you know, the pipe has failed, and a lot of things happen with that. And the other thing I'll just add to this, and I'm sorry for taking so much time, the Central Sanitary District, which is the one that operates our sewage facilities, is located at the very bottom, as our many sewage sanitary facilities, at the very bottom of the watershed, because they want all that stuff to flow downhill easily before it gets treated. And, you know, they are very seriously looking at sea level rise and the tidal influx into their facilities because of what that might mean to them going forward. So sorry about all that, taking so much time.
Yeah, and that affects everyone when a sewage treatment plant needs to raise the elevation of its outfalls or change the location of intake areas for water. I don't know where your water supply comes from, but it's more the very wet years alternating with very dry, a sequence of very dry years. And sounds like people haven't been warned as much about what could be in the water in a drinking water pipe if it's been shut off. An old pipe that's been shut off will usually allow some inflow.
Yeah.
Especially during the wet season. And that's where everything your neighbors have put on their lawns or on their roof to keep moss from growing, all those things come into the soil and into the groundwater.
Agreed.
Dale, are you there? You had your hand up?
Yeah, actually, it's Patty. My
okay.
internet was out in my room, so I came in here. So Dr. Hill, thank you for your talk. Very, very interesting, and I think important for us to be aware of. So beyond the being aware and learning more, which I think we need to do you have any ideas about social action? That's kind of what many of us are involved with, social sustainable Rossmoors, because we want to make a difference. Do you have any ideas about social action that we could take?
Well, I think as a community that's in a relatively privileged position compared to, let's say, Richmond or San Leandro or East Oakland, in terms of this won't be your issue. I mean, there'll be other things that come up. The cost of water, cost of fuel, all kinds of things, you know, could affect you with climate change, but this is not likely to be one of them. Being an ally for communities, especially people of color and other frontline communities on the coast, by talking to your representatives in Sacramento about how important it is to prioritize some of these sites. the infrastructure bill, as I mentioned in the talk, provides a few $1 billion for contaminated sites to be cleaned up. It would cost about 125, 127 million to clean up that old the Stauffer chemical site, the Zeneca site. And the owner, which is AstraZeneca, could be forced to pay for it. So it doesn't even have to come out of the infrastructure bill money. But someone has to do it. Someone has to decide to hold their feet to the fire. And that's not popular in a state where people are trying to find a third way between private sector profit and a kind of socialism. Nobody really wants to hold corporations accountable. And I think that we have to do that in this particular case and for other sites that Chevron has affected, for example, around that North Bay shoreline. So if we can encourage our state legislators to hold DTSC and the Water Board accountable, I think then we're being good allies to the people who are suffering the health impacts.
Thank you.
Great. Carol?
I have a comment and a question. Should I unmute? I am.
Yeah.
I double checked that my information was correct, but Baykeeper, who made a presentation to us about 6 months ago, made the comment that there's over 1,000 toxic sites around the shorelines in the Bay Area. Not all of them, many of them don't merit immediate worry, but it's an incredible number. It's just hard to imagine. They're elbow to elbow, just about all the way around the bay, and even parts of the Delta. The other question I had is there any uniformity? In other words, with pipes, can you say that the sewer pipes are down lower? So I'm just worried about which pipes are cracking and which pipes are going into the groundwater, and where when the groundwater is going to enter my drinking water. Is that
usually the groundwater
higher?
pipe, I mean, the sanitary sewers are at the bottom. Usually,
Okay.
That's a standard street cross section. And given the era when your community was built, it probably is at the bottom, in the middle of the street. And the gas lines are typically closer to the gutter. Those actually wiggle around a lot. So people think of them as somewhere in a 4 foot by 4 foot trench. They're in there somewhere. And then your storm sewers, are they separated or are they combined with the human waste pipes?
Ours are separate. They go, the stuff that goes in our storm drains goes into the creek. We have a nearly dry creek sometimes of the year, and right now it's flowing. But you can dump paint in the storm sewer in one part of the community, it'll show up in the creek.
Well, that's the vulnerability you have, is that anything your neighbors put on their grass or on their roof or spill in their driveway is going to end up in your system in some way. And if pipes are, like I said, the drinking water pipes are turned off, there is potential for contamination. I mean, that's kind of a third world situation more than it is a typical American situation. They often turn the water off for parts of the day in mega cities around the world. We don't see it so much in the US. New Orleans seems to always be turning the water off because something's broken with their water system. And then they go under a boil order for several days before they are confident that that water is really fresh and clean. It might be worth having some testing done in people's houses to see what the quality is when they turn the water on versus a day later or
And maybe
hours
that's
later.
being done. I don't know. I've never thought to ask the question, and this is news to me. So we will certainly pursue that. Another thing that our club is involved with is pollution and recycling. So I immediately think, oh my gosh, here go a lot more plastic water bottles. But anyway.
Well, hopefully people can use, a service that delivers bottles that get recycled or.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unlikely that there's a terrible problem, but there's a risk of it. So while we're having this conversation, I'm just bringing it up because it's possible.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you did. I'm very glad for your presentation and thank you for making yourself available on short notice tonight. People don't know, but you just got back yesterday from a trip, so and didn't know what was going to be sitting in your email. It's amazing you got through much of your email to get down to what we'd written, but thank you for being available.
Yeah, I'm happy to come.
Thank you very
And
much.
it sounds like you guys are doing well in terms of sea level rise, but of course you have other things to worry about. So I hope you'll be good allies for people on the coast because they do need your support. The counties often focus more on communities that actually have fewer problems because of the political associations with helping more wealthy communities. So I would think that it might be a good thing to try to redirect that attention. Like when you have a toddler and you have to redirect all the time. Politicians are like that. I hope nobody on the phone is an elected official on the call, but you have to kind of redirect them.
Thank you.
I was Dr. Hill. But I like the reference to being a toddler that needs to be redirected.
Good. Well, thank you for inviting me, and I hope you have a productive discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, well, with that, I think we should pretty much wrap it up here.
I'll give a report at the next meeting about boil orders for people that are having their water turned off and whether the water being turned off on, Oakmont or Golden Rain has any effect on the other part of Rossmoor. So I will try to get some information over the next month.
Okay.
Hey, Carol, can I just chime in one thing on that? And I was going to ask Dr. Hill, I didn't get a chance to, but it seems to me when a boil order goes into effect, and the only thing that's going to solve is it's going to kill any bacteria, right? But if the issue, the contamination is chemical, won't that exacerbate it? It'll concentrate it?
Concentrate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I just say
Nothing
one
like
thing?
concentrated hydrochloric acid.
Or hexavalent chlorine or whatever.
Can I say one thing, please?
Sure.
Hello? I think when East Bay Mud is working on their pipes here, when they're done, I think they flush out any contaminants. They're pretty, they're under laws and everything to provide safe water. And if it's not safe, then they'll do a boil. But I'm a little curious about, I just don't want people to be too afraid because I think that that gets flushed out. I don't know about when you work on Rossmoor pipes, but when you work on when they work on East Bay Mud pipes, they don't when they turn the water back on, they flush the system. So that's just that.
So just a quick question, just a quick thing is that First Mutual is going to be meeting with East Bay Mud, dealing with the water problems in the First Mutual, and I will be glad to ask them a question as to what they do in terms of whether they flush or what they don't flush. So just that will be one of my list to ask them.
Very good.
Okay. Terrific. Okay, well, with that, I'd like to announce what we're going to be talking about next month. Once again, thanks to Carol Weed. We're going to have an interesting talk on how EV savings surpass gas cars. Carol, who is it that is going to be doing the talk? Oh, Carol seems to have disappeared.
No, she's on mute.
Oh. Okay. Carol, can you unmute?
Shucks, I'm sorry. So the speaker is Anita Osborne is the main speaker with Dry Clean Bay Area. And there are as many as 7 different rebates that can be added on top of each other that end up with an optimal result for somebody in Rossmoor of $13,500 worth of incentives on certain makes of cars. So it'll be very interesting. There's also discounts with charging. So stay tuned.
Mhm. Okay, so that sounds like a really interesting topic. EV charging is definitely one of our focuses for this year because a lot of people are moving towards it. And so I think this will be a very interesting meeting that we have coming up next month. And thanks again to Carol for setting that.
One of the speakers is specifically working with the mutuals that have lower amperage in their carports and 110 volt meters and level 1 charger. So that is being explored and qualifies for MCE rebates. All this is made possible because we are a multi-family development. And that's one of the umbrellas that the California legislature decided to send some of the cap and trade money last year.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I see it's 8:35, so we should wrap this up. I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. I look forward to seeing everybody next month on the Feb 1st. And hopefully by March or maybe April, we'll have a meeting outdoors and have a chance to socialize. Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks, Adrian.
So long.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks, Barry.